I really welcome you to this session on product backlog grooming session, do's and don'ts. I thank your time on this Saturday. So let's get started with the theme of this session. See, product backlog grooming is a very important exercise. If we do not groom many stories in the product backlog, what happens is it applies pressure on sprint planning day. Like if your product backlog is a black box, that means it's not groomed and only the stories are brought on the sprint planning day. What happens is team struggles to groom those stories on the beginning day of the sprint. So usually it leads to the sprint planning session itself spreads to 6 hours on the first day of the sprint. So because of which, what happens is, the first day of the sprint gets wasted, number one. Number two, if the product backlog grooming session is not properly conducted, what happens is whatever stories that are available for the product owner, they will be brought forward to the team, right? So we don't want that to be situation. Basically, the product owner is responsible for improving the return on investment on the product that we are working on. So if the product owner does not utilize, if the team does not utilize or does not give proper importance to the product backlog grooming session, what happens is the whole objective of adding return on investment, maximum return on investment to the product itself is compromised. Imagine a scenario that whatever stories that are available, if the product owner brings it on the sprint planning day, or whatever the technical stories which strikes the development team, they will put in front of the product on the sprint planning day. What are we doing? We are basically taking up stories that are immediately available or loose ends, and we're working on it. Now, when we work in this scenario, then what is the whole purpose of running this project? The whole purpose of agile or sprints is work in a fixed timelines, work on priority items first. That means the must-haves should be first worked upon. Then the should have feature should be worked upon. Then nice to have feature should be worked upon. So there should be a proper roadmap stating this is the first cut of the release I'm going to work upon, and I may take 2 to 3 releases to actually get to a completion of my must to have features. Number one. Number two is once my must to have features are done, then I need to have the should have features. Okay, so if I have to talk in a very plain, simple language, first you have to work upon bare minimum feature that makes your product to work like a product, a bare minimum product. Then you have to actually compare with the market, and you have to have all the features that your competition is providing. Then you need to attach more features that distinguishes your product from the other products, right, friends? So the whole purpose of the product development is not following agile, my friends. The whole purpose of product, the agile development is not agile. See, my friends, please understand, following agile, implementing agile is not the whole purpose of it. It's a means to it. What is important is, are we delivering product with best quality? Are we providing best return on investment to the sponsors? Are we ensuring that proper collaboration is happening? Are we ensuring that people are happy working on the product? Are we ensuring that we realize the lessons learned during the sprint? Are we ensuring that we are giving best customer experience in terms of predictability, quality, and consistency? This is what is important. And towards this, agile is adding value. Now, Agile is a channel, it is a vehicle, but we have to use the vehicle properly. And if at all, we have a must to have features, should have features, nice to have features, then those features need to be planned in a roadmap session. And in that roadmap session, you need to have the backlogs to be properly groomed. If in a scenario that, you actually bring in whatever is seems to be visible or approachable for you, if you bring up those stories, then the whole purpose of the agile project mission itself is lost. So that is the reason this product backlog grooming session, we dedicate a fixed amount of time during the sprint, wherein we groom stories of the product backlog items for the future sprints. So our product backlog is ready to a reasonable extent, so that sprint planning, on a sprint planning day, if a product owner brings up 6 stories, at least 5 stories, our team must already be having exposure about those 5 stories, because they must have groomed in the previous product backlog grooming sessions, and 1 story, ad hoc story, can be there on the sprint planning day. Thereby, the sprint planning can be conducted on the specified time. And also, we focus on what are the real stories, or what are the real stories that we need to work upon to ensure that we provide maximum return on investment. So friends, this is the significance. On the field, what is happening is we are not paying proper attention to the product backlog grooming session, because of which what is happening is we are appearing as if our goal is to follow agile, but we are not understanding the business targets, the business objectives behind implementing agile. Again, I'm saying agile is a vehicle, right? Agile is the ability to move quickly and easily. It is a vehicle. It has the recipe. We have to use the recipe properly to meet our business targets of maximum return on investment, people happiness, best customer experience, innovation, and people happiness. So these are the things that are very important. And for this, my friend, requirements makes the best cut. It's actually acts in the center of the circle. And the requirement grooming is what is the product backlog grooming. So with this, friends, let's get into the theme of this session. So let's get into the session. So let's understand, friends, what is product backlog refinement? Backlog grooming, it's also called as backlog refinement. It is a recurring event, that is adopted in agile project development teams. As I said, it happens in the mid of the sprint, my friends. It happens in the mid of the sprint, right? It happens in the mid of the sprint, okay? And it's basically, its major purpose is, to ensure that next few sprints are properly loaded with proper groomed stories. What is grooming, my friend? Why are we using the word grooming? Grooming is all about taking a comb and grooming your hair, right? An ungroomed hair looks in a different haphazard way. A groomed hair looks to be, yes, now I'm ready, I can go outside. Likewise, a groomed user story provides more clearer description about what to be developed, right? The primary purpose of the backlog grooming session is to ensure the next few sprints worth of user stories in the product backlog are prepared well, and so that the sprint planning can be completed in its duration. Now, the backlog refinement session is an opportunity for the product managers and product owners and the team to explain the strategic purposes behind the prioritized items in the backlog. These conversations can help improve alignment across the cross-functional teams. It is not about bringing stories and presenting it to you. It's about you should be able to explain the strategic purpose behind these stories. For example, I wanted to put a login feature. I wanted to put in a forgot password. I want to put this particular thing. The reason is I want to develop. First, I'm actually ensuring that the product is capable of meeting the minimum viable product. Then we get onto the stage of ensuring that whatever is competition is offering, we are also offering. Then third one is market advantage features. One is minimum viable. The second one is the parity with the competition. The third one is ensuring that we have certain edge over competition. And then, okay, for minimum viable product, these features are important, and this is how it is important. Likewise, we should be in a position to explain the product owners. It's a great opportunity for the product owners to explain about the importance of these requirements so that the team really feels kicked about it. So let's get on to the next one. So what we do as part of product backlog refinement, it's very simple. We add, modify, delete big items. We analyze the items, we re-estimate the items, we reprioritize items. These are all for future sprints, not for the current sprints. Who are parties to this particular event? Team, product owner, and scrum master. And product owner or the team can also invite the team friends relating to the subject. Okay, next. Now, what's the duration? Generally, 10% of the capacity that is reserved for the sprint. We should not cross more than 10% of the capacity, right? So usually for a 6-member team, 4 to 8 hours, that much amount of time is needed, right? And it's very important activity. What we do is whatever time we are planning for this product backlog grooming session, those many hours, we separate it out or we deduct it from the team's capacity so that the stories are not planned for this particular time, so that people are focused on this particular thing. So what is the summary? Number one, you add stories, you modify stories, you delete stories based upon the product owner's prioritization, product owner's advice. Okay. And then what you do is we analyze items, we add more details into the items, we change the rank and the priority of the product backlog items, right? And then what is the duration? 4 to 8 hours for a 6-member team for 2-week sprints. So basically the key thumb is for any sprint capacity, 10% of the capacity, that amount of duration, this product backlog refinement should not cross. So people adopt this product backlog refinements in phases. For example, this 4 to 8 hours, people can do it in increments. For example, 3 hours this time, 3 week, or 4 hours this week, 4 hours next week. For example, if you are aiming for 4 hours, then 2 hours this week, 2 hours next week. In some other teams, people also go with the concept of, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 days, each 1 hour, and then next week, 1 hour. So likewise, so that they are focused, and gaining the team's focus for 1 hour is very important, rather than putting them in a 3 hours, 4 hours workshop. So the different formats are adopted, but the key thing is no more than 10% of the team's capacity reserved for the sprint. That much duration, the product backlog refinement should not cross. It can be less than or equal to 10% of the team capacity. Yeah. So friends, there are 3 things that you have to keep in mind. Okay. Number one is the deep product backlog, right? Many agile practitioners say deep product backlog is the key outcome of a backlog refinement session. So the product backlog should be detailed appropriately, meeting definition of ready. We will be discussing about definition of ready shortly. So it should be detailed. Okay, see, it should be the outcome of conversations. As much detail as we provide in the story, so much important it is. The second one is emergent. So at any given point in time, we should be able to add new stories, or it's easy to add new stories or modify the stories. So there's nothing set on the stone. That means we have defined stories like this, so it should be like this. No, based upon the understanding at a different points in time, we can always add new stories, we can modify stories. The third one is estimated. So we should be able to estimate each user story. That can be in terms of story points or t-shirt sizing. We'll be looking at shortly. And then the next one is prioritized. Means all stories should be prioritized based on a rank. So if you see, D stands for detailed, E stands for emergent, E stands for estimated, P stands for prioritized. DEEP, deep. So the product backlog should be detailed, it should be emergent, it should be estimated, and it should be prioritized. Okay. The next one concept is definition of ready. See, friends, what is definition of ready? See, a user story must be ready so that the team can pick it up. So why are we putting this particular concept called definition of ready? We are putting this concept because, my friend, what happens is product owner prioritize a story, and when team says, I still need so-and-so clarities, they still push items to the team's sprint backlog. And because of XYZ formalities or blah, 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 they accept the stories and the stories get stuck. Why? Because there was an external dependency that input is not there. Okay, some external hardware should be ready, that is not there. External input should be there, that is not there. Okay, some acceptance criteria is not proper. So people are not able to understand, they can't able to progress. So what is the use and fun in picking up stories into sprint backlog, and third day and fourth day you are stuck, and you continuously show that you're stuck, and your product velocity gets decreased on the sprint planning day. So Agile is giving a weapon, a power to the team, saying that you can reject a story if it is not meeting a checklist that's called definition of ready. So what is the checklist? Team can decide the checklist. The checklist, we are giving a broad framework called INVEST. One is stories should be independent. That means there are occasions wherein a 40 story points worth of work, a 13 story points worth of work, a 20 story points worth of work are awarded to the team. So they can't complete those stories in one sprint itself. Most probably the story is not broken to independent levels. It's independent means like the way the trees leaves will be there. To that extent, the story is to be defined. We don't want the stories to be branches, semi-branches, tiny branches. We want the stories to be the independent leaves of a tree, so that there is no commonality and it is very easy to finish it. Generally, we want a story to be defined in such a way that it can be completed in a period of 5 days. Okay, then negotiable. I should be able to negotiate what is there in the scope of the project. Why it is like this? Why not we build like this? Why are we building acceptance criteria like this? Now, if we having this much big acceptance criteria for this small user story, why can't we split it further? Right? So what is the fun of having a user story with 10 acceptance criteria cases? Why not we split it? Why not we split it into even further fundamental stories? And then third one is valuable. Friends, I come across scenario on the ground wherein team says, I will complete development and unit testing required for the story in this sprint. But then what is the value business is getting out of it? See, you are working on development and unit testing for this user story. Now, and that means you are not completing the functional testing, you are not completing the regression testing, integration testing, you're not deploying at least in a pre-production environment. So product is not able to realize value. So the best way to go back and ask product is, because my capacity is less, I'm not able to complete a valuable piece for you. There are two options here. Number one is, can I pick up another story in this place so that with a less bandwidth, I can work on it? Number one. Number two, or can I split it further? Because it's big, I'm not able to provide you a valuable piece that you can experience at the end of the sprint, right? So I stands for independent, N stands for negotiable, and V stands for valuable, and E stands for estimable, friends, estimable. Okay, that means you should be able to estimate it. And S stands for small. Friends, let's have stories where it is in the plan, we can able to complete one sprint. Okay, in reality, it can skip. But in the plan itself, if we plan for 2 sprints, 3 sprints, that is not acceptable. As per the plan, right, it should be completed within a sprint. And finally, it's a testable. That means each and every acceptance criteria should be testable. Right, so you cannot say, look, some innovation, some cognizant factors, you can't put it. Every acceptance criteria should be measurable, testable, recordable, right? So this is called invest principle. So looking at the invest principle, people can come back and say user stories should be defined at the smallest possible level. Number one. Number two, user stories should be defined in a template called as a user, I want this functionality so that I can achieve that so-and-so benefit. Number two, acceptance criteria should be defined in a specified formula. Acceptance criteria to include happy path and alternate paths and failure paths and also the performance conditions. Okay, and all the I can say performance criteria or the scalability and reliability factors are taken care. Okay, and then boundary conditions are taken care, and the mock-up screens are available, and all the dependent stories are defined clear. Only then I can take up a story. So this is a checklist prepared by the team. Number one, user story should be independent. Number two, user story should be in this defined template. Number three, the acceptance criteria should be defined in this template and it should cover so-and-so scenarios. Number five, assumption should be clearly defined. Number six, constraint should be defined. Number seven, the size of the story should be estimated. Number eight, the mock-ups are required. The team prepares a checklist like this. Now, tomorrow, the product owner brings a 40 story points worth of work and says, guys, please take it up. I can't change, I can't split it any further. Then they bring it to the definition of ready and say, guys, it should be small enough that it can fit into a sprint. So I can't take it up. You do your groundwork and come back. So this is what is definition of ready. It's a checklist, right? Where product owner and team agrees upon, and the story should be complying to that checklist so the team can pick up only the definition of ready stories. So friends, when you talk about product backlog, it is a living document of all the stories. Okay, the stories can have functional requirements, it can have defects, it can have knowledge items, it can have technology related items that matters everything to the product. Okay, and three key principles about product backlog. One, it should be deep compliant. That means it should be detailed, emergent, estimated, and prioritized. Okay, and then we need to make sure that each story is groomed to a level that is compliant with definition of ready. And then the invest principle, like this is a generic principle we suggest, so that you can arrive at DOR principle, DOR definition of ready checklist. Yeah. So what is the expected patterns of product backlog? Right, friends? It includes detailed requirement analysis. It splits large items into smaller ones. It involves estimation of new items, re-estimation of existing items. So it is not for the item that is targeted for the current sprint. It is for the items that are targeted for future items, at least for next 1 or 2 sprints minimum. Now, with this practice of grooming product backlog refinement session in the mid of the sprint, your sprint planning becomes relatively simple because the product owner and Scrum team starts the planning with a clear, well-analyzed, and carefully estimated set of items. So friends, this is what is the whole concept between product backlog refinement session. The product backlog refinement session happens in the mid of the sprint. Okay, the duration should not cross the more than 10% of the capacity of the team, right? And it should happen in the mid of the sprint so that people are not bothered about either sprint planning or sprint demo. That's why it happens in a 2-week sprint. On the 5th day it happens. Okay, and you can as well conduct 1 hour each session on the beginning days of the sprint so that people can coolly groom the stories. What is grooming? Grooming is all about ensuring that user stories are compliant with the DOR definition of ready principle. The product backlog is compliant with the deep principle. Okay, friends, now let's get into the specifics. Okay, what to groom? What is grooming? Grooming is all about grooming your hair. So likewise, grooming is all about detailing. What are the 2 key principles? Number 1 is deep. Okay, number 2 principle is definition of ready. Okay, the definition of ready, you can derive it using the invest principle. Okay, the first one is what to groom. So basically, friends, functional features, technical features, knowledge items, bugs, defects to stabilize the product, everything that matters to the product will be there in the product backlog. And the user story is defined in a template called as a user or as a role. I want this functionality so that I can achieve this. So the typical example here is, as a bank customer, I want to transfer funds between my linked accounts so that I can fund my credit card. So what happens is I have two accounts. So from one account to another account, if I transfer it, now the account that gets connected to my credit card, I can able to transfer now, right? From this account, I can fund my credit card. So that is an example of a properly defined user story. Okay, acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is the template we follow is given a context. Okay, when a trigger happens, then the expected condition happens. So the acceptance criteria is given a context. For example, in the example that I've talked about is given that the account has sufficient funds, when the customer requests an inter-account transfer, then ensure the source account is debited and the target account is credited. So friends, what I'm telling here, I'm telling, given a context, when a trigger happens, then an expected condition happens. Many times with many agile teams that I've been working upon or I've listened to, is they do not give much importance to this. Why? Because what is there? I have some PFS tool, I have some other tool, and we write expected conditions, or we just write in a expected conditions. See, please try adopting this template. Given that there is a peak power usage, when we switch on all the electrical appliances like geyser, like air conditioner, and all other electrical appliances, then my geyser is not working or my AC is not working. It gives enormous message, the expected condition. When you club it with the context and the trigger, then basically it gives a lot of happiness. For example, if you're a parent, okay, and you're not happy with the school, so people say, I want to change my kid to the next school. That won't happen like this. Many parents are not happy with their kids' schools. But the people who change is, given that my school is not online teaching compliant, when they force my kid to come to the school in this pandemic, then I decided to change. It gives a big message, my friend. I want to change my kid to the next school. Is not that. Given my kid's school is not online compliant, either in terms of teachers or infrastructures, when they force my kid to come to the school in the pandemic, then I rather want to switch to a school that provides an online education to my kid. So when you attach a context and trigger, then it gives a lot of clarity to the expected conditions. So the acceptance criteria should be defined in this template, like given a context, when a trigger happens, then an expected condition. Now, the acceptance criteria should include happy path, alternate paths, failure paths, and non-functional measures. You can actually refer my YouTube video called How to Write Good User Stories. You can refer that particular thing where I have explained using examples of how to build acceptance criteria, how to write user stories. You can go through that particular video for more details. The next one is sizing. The sizing can be done in terms of planning poker, numbers like Fibonacci series, 0, half, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and then after modified Fibonacci series, 20, 40, 100, or a T-set sizing, like, small, medium, large, extra large. The whole thing is the sizing evolves around 3 parameters called complexity, uncertainty, and the effort involved. My dear friend, if 1 hour effort done by a cycle mechanic and 1 hour effort done by a doctor, a surgeon who is doing operations, and 1 hour work done by a military professional at war, All the three people have done only 1 hour task: cycle mechanic, doctor, surgeon, and the military professional. But the complexity in case of a cycle mechanic is less compared to electrical person. Compared to this doctor, surgeon. Similarly, the risk factor undertaken by the military professional is more. So as and when the complexity increases, as and when the risk gets increased, you tend to attach more story points. Why? Because that much amount of attention is needed. So what is story points? Story point is a relative number compared to a specific story. If I consider this as a 2 story points worth of work, compared to this, how much this story looks like. Okay, compared to this, how much it looks like. Effort wise, it takes double. Okay, 2 to 4. Then complexity wise, same, but risk wise, it takes a bit more. Okay, 5. So 5 story points, I will take it. So what are you doing? You are relatively estimating the effort, the complexity, and the risk to arrive at it. And it's quick way of arriving at the size. Why? In real world, if we take more number of days to accurately estimate, the assumptions that we take while estimating a story, right, is not actually being true. When the assumptions are not true while doing estimation, then the outcome of estimation is wrong. Then Agile says, don't go for very stricter, very finer, very precise estimation. Rather, go for relative size estimation, which is very easy. For example, if you have to go to a 500 kilometers or 500 miles destination. Now, going to 200 miles destination takes, let's say, 6 hours. Going to 500 miles probably will take 15 hours. That's it, plain simple. So if it takes 6 hours to reach 200-mile destination, going by the same vehicle, that can be train, that can be bus, that can be flight, whatever it is, if 6 hours is what it takes to reach 200 miles, then it takes 15 hours approximately to reach 500 miles. Very clear. Compared to this, if somebody says, no, I don't take 6 hours, I take 4 hours. Okay. To reach 200 miles, you take 4 hours. So to reach 500 miles, it takes 9 hours or 10 hours. That's it. Simple. So you have to keep complexity, risk, and effort. And you can either go with a planning poker based Fibonacci series, which is 0, half, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and later modified series. Or you can simply say simple, medium, large, and Excel, right? So this is a separate topic in itself, but I'm actually summarizing it. You can actually refer one of my videos where I have explained the details about it. Okay. Now, the other factor is dependencies. For example, if you are taking up a task called assembling the parts, right? Collecting parts should be there, then only you can assemble it. And then paint assembly, like whatever you assemble the parts, the piece, that if at all you have to paint it, what happens is first you have to assemble it. So if you are working on a story called assembling parts, you'll say, is collecting parts completed? Right. So that's my upstream dependency. Unless my upstream is done, I can't work on my story. Similarly, unless I do assembly parts, my downstream story called paint assembly cannot be done. So we have to make sure while grooming story, what is the story without completion of which I can't proceed, which is upstream dependency. That should be clear and that should be noted. If that story is not ready, then I can't start this. Similarly, what is the story that is waiting on my completion of the story? That story is a downstream story. So what they want, I will come to know upfront. So I know from whom I expect what, and I also know who is expecting out of me. So it's like a river flow, right? Upstream, from up to the down, it flows, right? So up stories are the stories where I wait upon, and the down stories are the stories which wait on me, right? So this is called the dependencies. We should be very clear in grooming stories. And then the mock-ups, right? The mock-ups, the innovation is, it doesn't have any bounds. So mock-ups, like, for each of the user stories, if they have user interface, what are the mock-ups? Okay. And then similarly, precisely what happens, right? What happens in the product backlog grooming? You pick up a user story, and you want user story to be defined in a format called, as a user, I want this functionality so that I can achieve this. Then next one is acceptance criteria. Given a specific context, when a trigger happens, then this is the expected condition. And the acceptance criteria should include happy path, alternate paths, failure paths, functional requirements, boundary paths, all those paths. The next one is sizing. Sizing either in terms of story points using planning poker or t-shirt sizing. Upstream and downstream dependencies, right? The dependent stories, just now we discussed about it, and wireframes or mockups. The risks, the assumptions, the constraints, and the pending clarifications. These are the details we have to bring in. This is what is called grooming. So what is grooming, my friend? Grooming is not simply walking into a product backlog grooming session meeting and then talking about user stories and come back. No, it's all about a conversations, a rich conversations, okay, around user story, acceptance criteria, sizing, upstream dependencies, downstream dependencies, wireframes, risks, assumptions, constraints, and pending clarifications. So friends, this is the value addition you are taking from this session, right? In most scenarios, you probably have a user story and acceptance criteria. That's what you refer as grooming. No, it includes these things. More importantly, it's not about, capturing these details. It's about the conversations around it is more important. They are ritual and they educate the team. They connect the team. Look, my friends, requirement is such an interesting piece of development, software development life cycle, wherein everybody's interests intersect there. So when we present these kind of details, it brings motivation, it brings connect, it brings synergy. It also ensure that people are connected on the overall objectives. So this is what is grooming is all about. Okay, friends, this is what it is. So far, we have discussed about what do's of product backlog grooming session. So far, we discussed about do's. Do's means what is the product backlog refinement session. Product backlog refinement session happens in mid of the sprint or in a separate intervals. The whole duration should not cross 10% of team's capacity. Usually, people may take 3 to 4 hours in a 2-week sprint by a 6-member team, but it's up to the team. The whole norm is it should not cross more than 10% of the team capacity. It happens in a time wherein people are not pressured, either with the sprint planning that happens in the beginning of the sprint or sprint demo that happens in the last day of the sprint. So in between the sprint, when people can focus more there, they actually come up, they groom stories. What is grooming? Grooming is all about elaborating the details. What are those details? Whatever I'm discussing here, these 10 points in this particular slide. So this is what is do's of product backlog grooming. Now, friends, I want to talk about the anti-patterns, don'ts. Okay, we're going to talk about 9 anti-patterns. The first anti-pattern is product owner brings up a single line user stories, right? He doesn't do his groundwork, right? He just writes it out and he brings it up. Okay, he maintains a good relationship with some of the technical people and he get things done. So what happens is, when single line user stories are there, there's a high probability that, a lot of assumptions people make it, okay? Or, the team takes more time to groom the stories there, right? See, at the end of the day, the product owner needs to do his groundwork and then he needs to bring it to the team's attention. Then team adds another 30%, 20% details, certain times 40% detail. But if the product owner himself, I've seen product owners who's actually bring only 5 to 10% clarity to the story and remaining 90%, they leave it on to the team. So when team asks questions, the product owner say, okay, whatever you think, you do it. You take best possible assumption. Likewise, they tell. It's basically they are exposing that they are not doing their good job. Friends, at the requirement stage, if you don't do good job, what happens, friends? It is a product failure. All teams' effort is leading to a failure, and it leads to demotivation to the business, to the sponsor, to the customers, and to the team. So that's why, my friends, requirements is very important stage. Now we have to tell to the product owner, can you please bring in the groom user stories here? Whatever you can do, you do. And the rest of the things you depend on us, then we can basically add more details into it. So this kind of anti-pattern leads to a situation wherein teams don't like the product backlog grooming session at all, right? So we have to ensure the Scrum Master and along with the required people in the power, we should be able to ensure that the product owner is given a feedback that don't bring single line user stories. Rather, you do your groundwork and bring the story. Then team can start adding details. The second anti-pattern is, in the product backlog grooming session, we are saying we need conversations. And then you know what? There are certain people, if you just allow them, they'll talk like anything, right? And certain people are there, they talk and they think that they are the best in the world. You can't even stop them. If you stop them, they'll be very unhappy with you. See, whatever they're talking may be right only, but that's not relevant to our conversation. That is not relevant to current situation. And then is unnecessary, unproductive discussions, irrelevant discussions. What happens is you end up grooming one story in 3 hours. I've seen 2 stories being groomed up in 3 to 4 hours. Then people say, guys, why am I wasting my time here? I'm not liking this. And then, the Scrum Master ships or pushes or forces people to be in the room, and team members, they don't like it. So they start and looking at their laptop, mobile phones. And see, at the end of the day, friends, teams don't cooperate mostly because of the people who are in the decision phase. They don't do a proper job. So we need, instead of blaming the people on the ground, we have to blame ourselves, and we have to see and what best we can change. So unproductive, unnecessary discussion should not happen. So Scrum Masters and need to alert, coach people. Agile coaches need to coach people. Okay, there's another anti-pattern. The third anti-pattern is the teams are asked to groom incidents and bugs. So people bring in bugs and they can't reproduce the bugs, and they require time to do investigation. And they will ask, okay, can you please groom it? No, you can't groom it because you don't know the length of the work, the scope of the work, unless you complete the investigation phase within the bug. Okay. The fourth anti-pattern is, a clear template, like, whatever template we said, like, here, if you see, this is the template we give for the product backlog grooming session. Even after that, right, stories are not groomed as per the template. That means, see, it is not about adhering to the template. It's about whether assumptions, dependencies, clarifications. If you don't detail now, and if you unearth or find it while you're working on the story, then you get into a problematic stage. So instead of getting to a problematic stage while you implement or work on a story, it is better to capture all those things so that you can accordingly size it. This is not a 10 or a 13 story points worth of work. It is a 40 story points worth of work. So instead of 13 story points and it's 40 story points, it takes more duration. Why? Because these assumptions are there. These dependencies are missed out. These clarifications were not provided, because of which you were thinking this is a less user story point worth of work. No, it is not 13. It is 40. Now it has to be provided more focus. It has to be provided with more energy, more duration, and probably we can split the stories. So all those things will come. So this template is actually helping you to capture all aspects of user stories. Okay, the next pattern is, now we don't we don't give importance, and we don't spend enough time for product backlog grooming session at all. That means I've seen teams wherein the product backlog grooming session is missed. They compromise on it. So this sprint, they compromise because of reason 1. Next sprint, mid of the sprint, they compromise of product backlog grooming session because of reason 2. Compromise means the session will be cancelled. So when you cancel this session, when you don't give importance to the session, what happens is, as I told at the beginning of the session, is you won't be building a product that matters a lot to the business, that provides best return on investment. You will be building a product on features which are easily accessible to you, and then you can't compete in the market tomorrow. And also your product backlog is a black box, right? Only few things are visible to you. That's not a good pattern, right? We need to give there. If at all you come across situations saying that your product backlog is not up to not properly groomed, rather you run a sprint zero and just groom stories so that at least for next 6 to 7 sprints stories are groomed, and then you start running the session in the mid of the sprint so that always you have user stories ready for the next 2 releases. Now, team is not actually, another pattern is team is not focused in terms of deleting unwanted stories or modifying existing stories. So the whole, when they just don't focus on it. Okay, you come to the meeting? Yes, I have come. Did you participate? Yes, I participated. Did you talk? Yeah, 1 or 2 words I spoke. See, when you don't focus on this important event, right, and you end up in a situation wherein you keep your unwanted stories as the main stories, and you keep working on unwanted stories, and those stories won't actually add a lot of value to you, right? So it is like your bookshelf, and you open your bookshelf, there's unwanted books, where the books which you think that I will study, but you never study. So in the process, what you do is whatever books you study, you put it underneath in a situation wherein they don't have any space. So the textbook cover gets torn, our pages will get torn because there's no space. But whereas unnecessary stuff it will be taking the shape of a king's treatment in your bookshelf. Likewise, if you don't provide focus towards this session, you will ensure that unwanted, non-priority stories enjoying the status of priority stories, and ultimately one fine man will come and ask you, guys, why are you doing this? Why are you working on it? Cancel it, scrap it. All those things will happen, right? So we need to really give importance, we need to give focus to this session. The next anti-pattern is the entire team is not engaged in the product backlog refinement session. So there are a couple of members, they dominate, and they'll be talking. Even if some members want to talk, they won't actually let these people speak. So Scrum Master need to really do a great job there, wherein everybody's inputs are properly listened to, and some dominated members are offline coached, saying that if you take this much amount of time, when others will speak, kind of a stuff, right? So we need to coach the people in such a way that everybody is engaged. See, the problem is, if everybody's inputs are not taken, what happens is your conversations were not rich. And when your conversations are not rich, then the quality of the product or the estimation about the product will not be rich. So everybody's inputs need to be taken while while talking about the requirements or user stories or product backlog items. The next one is now, most of the team members, they focus on their work by bringing laptops. So we have to, and so they are not engaged. So everybody thinks that, it is something, this product backlog refinement session is some work that I'm doing towards product one. No, it is, we are doing to ourselves, right? So people are just looking at their laptops, and they don't focus in this particular session. Then what happens is they're not engaged. And if they're not engaged, I already told about the scenarios, right? So I already told about scenarios. What will happen if they don't engage? If they don't engage, they don't lead to more conversations, and not having many conversations will hide the complexity, the uncertainty, the risk, the effort involved within each user story. So engagement, our conversations, our rich engagement is very, very important. And Scrum Master has to do a proper job in ensuring that team members are properly engaged. So finally, friends, so far we have discussed about don'ts. What are the anti-patterns? Now, finally, there is a big problem on the ground. The problem is we are not able to groom many stories in product backlog grooming session, right? For example, let's have a 3-hour session. In 3-hour session, only 2 stories are getting groomed. I've seen that situation. Some people asked my support. Now, the best way, my friend, to groom many stories is, many stories means 6 stories, 7 stories in a 3-hour long a product backlog grooming session is, first of all, the product owner need to do his or her homework, and they need to bring in the stories in the suggested template and say, let's assume that the product backlog grooming session is scheduled to happen 2 days from now or 3 days from now, the product owner will share the list of stories along with the details, saying that these are the stories we are targeting to groom in the upcoming product backlog refinement session. Now, what happens is they share this particular story with the senior members of the team, and the senior members go through this. You see, it's about engaging with the stories. Okay, you go through, the senior members go through the stories, try to go through the details. See, the details, product owner brings the stakeholder perspective, product owner brings the business perspective, but we're also a technical team. We also will be having a view about the internals of the story, because we have been working on the product for a long time. So with that perspective, go through the stories, understand the stories, discuss it, and then you may reach to the product owner offline for okay, you are talking about these is this stories about all those things. I understand. Let's discuss these things in detail in the product backlog grooming session. But however, I thought this is what you're actually meaning about. So see, friends, we talk about movies, we talk about other fun activities. Why don't we talk about something that matters to business as well? So the moment a team member receives the list of the stories from the product owner, what you do is you engage, you spend time with the stories, and at the back of the mind, something gets processed. You keep getting ideas about it, you discuss about it, and you go to the product backlog grooming session with a situation of something about it. When you know something about it as a senior member, it's very easy for you to bring in your own team members onto the same page. See, product owner may struggle to bring your team members onto the same page. Whereas as a team member, a senior member of the team, I have a connect. I know what they're thinking. I know what their pulse is. So I can actually bring them back and to the same common understanding. So once the user stories are visible, at least 2 to 3 days before product backlog grooming session, when team members willing to engage with the user stories, they have that interest. What's the stories is going to be, what they're going to solve as part of that. And then when they wanted to engage with the product owner for an offline quick session, and when they enter the product backlog grooming session with a known picture, somewhat known picture, then the opportunity for grooming stories is more. So I have seen this technique has helped me in my experience of grooming, almost like 20 minutes, one story we can groom, right? So this is what it is. This technique has helped me, and I request you to try it out. Yeah, so this is what it is, friends. So I thank your interest to learn, and I look forward to add more value add sessions in future. And so far we discussed about do's, that means how to conduct product backlog refinement session, and don'ts, that means 9 anti-patterns that can derail this event. And we also discussed about a technique that that can be useful to you to groom many stories in the product backlog grooming session. With this, I take your questions. Okay.